Act like you're with me. Those 6 words hadn't yet been spoken, but they hovered like a promise waiting to break open. Natalie stood at the entrance of the grand reception hall, a single-place card trembling between her fingers. Crystal chandeliers sprayed light across the vast room, scattering 1,000 reflections onto polished marble and glass. The scent of orchids and expensive champagne mixed with perfume, laughter, and whispered conversations. Every detail screamed luxury, belonging, and family, except for the small, folding table hidden behind a dying potted palm. A table for one. Her table. She adjusted the sleeve of her modest beige dress with her right hand, her only hand, and forced herself to breathe. She'd been preparing for this moment for 10 years without realizing it. But still, standing at her sister's wedding and being exiled like a shameful secret was a wound deeper than anything she'd braced for. "Miss, that's your assigned seat," the waiter repeated, eyes sliding past hers, clearly uncomfortable with the orders he'd been given. The Whitfields had been explicit. The Whitfields. Not Mom and Dad. Never Mom and Dad. Not once in 10 years. "I understand," Natalie whispered, barely audible over the soft jazz drifting from the corner. She started the long walk across the reception hall. 200 pairs of eyes pretended not to watch. 200 people in designer gowns and Italian suits pretending not to notice the 22-year-old girl, with one arm being sent to sit alone. Robert Sinclair loosened his tie at table 8, champagne untouched, attention fixed on the young woman, navigating the sea of round tables draped in silk and crowned with towering orchids. Each table sat 8. Each table but one. "Can you believe Veronica actually invited her?" A woman hissed at the next table. "After everything the Whitfields did for that girl, taking her in after that accident, raising her like their own." "Like their own," another scoffed. "Please, Linda. We all know why Harold really adopted her. His company was hemorrhaging after those layoffs. Taking in a disabled orphan was the best PR move he ever made." Robert's hand tightened around his glass. He watched Natalie reach her lonely table, saw her shoulders shake once, just once, before she straightened and sat, gaze fixed on the ice sculpture of 2 swans she'd never be close enough to touch. Daddy would have done something, he heard in his mind, his daughter Abigail's voice. 7 years old, and somehow wiser than most adults he knew. Just this morning she'd made him promise to make a friend at the wedding. "Mommy wouldn't want you to be lonely, Daddy." Patricia, 3 years gone now, would already be halfway to that corner, fierce sense of justice blazing. She'd never tolerated someone being made to feel less than human. The jazz shifted to a slower melody. The bride, Veronica, floated past in her $30,000 dress, her laugh tinkling like breaking glass. When her eyes flicked toward Natalie's corner, Robert caught the flash of satisfaction there. Cool. Deliberate. That was when he stood up. "Robert, where you going?" Margaret from accounting grabbed his sleeve. "They're about to serve the salmon." "There's something I need to do." He pulled free. Each step across the reception hall felt like walking through honey, thick, slow, and deliberate. Every eye gradually turned. A man in a modest department store suit, walking away from his assigned place, heading toward the girl everyone had agreed to ignore. Natalie didn't look up when his shadow fell across her table. She'd learned not to expect kindness from well-dressed strangers. "Excuse me," he said gently. That gentleness made her look up. "I'm Robert Sinclair. I work with Matthew." He gestured vaguely toward the head table where the groom sat beside his bride. "I couldn't help but notice you're sitting alone." "It's fine." The words came out automatic, practiced. This is where they wanted me to. "I know," Robert said softly, pulling out the empty chair across from her without invitation. "But here's the thing. My daughter's 7. She made me promise to make at least one new friend at this wedding. She worries about me being lonely since her mother passed." His voice dropped to a whisper meant only for her. "Would you do me an enormous favor and act like you're with me just for the reception? You'd really be helping me out." Natalie searched his face with a joke, for the cruelty she was used to finding behind polite smiles. But all she saw was sadness that matched her own, and something else. Genuine anger on her behalf. "Your daughter," her voice cracked. "She's wiser than her old man most days." Robert smiled, transforming his whole face. "So, what do you say? My table has an empty seat, and I could really use the company. These accounting folks are nice enough, but they've been talking about tax codes for the last 20 minutes. A small, surprised laugh escaped her, the first genuine sound of joy she'd made all day. "I don't know anything about tax codes." "Perfect. Neither does anyone else. They just pretend." He stood, offering his arm. "Shall we?" Natalie stared at his extended elbow. In 10 years with the Whitfields, no one had ever offered their arm to her. They'd walked ahead, embarrassed by her missing limb, embarrassed by the reminder of the tragedy that had brought her into their lives. "People will stare," she warned. "Let them," he said simply. Her hand trembled as she placed it in the crook of his elbow. Together, they began walking back across the reception hall. Whispering rippled out from their path like waves from a thrown stone. "Everyone," Robert announced as they reached his table, pulling out the empty chair beside his own with a flourish. "This is Natalie. Natalie, these are my colleagues from Brennan and Associates." Margaret's mouth fell open. James from payroll choked on his wine. But Robert just smiled pleasantly, helping Natalie into her seat as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Robert," Margaret hissed, "do you know who that is? That's the Whitfield's adopted daughter, the one they stuck in a corner to eat alone at her own sister's wedding." "Yes," Robert said calmly. "I notice." The table fell silent. Natalie stared at her plate, cheeks burning. She started to stand. "I should go back." Robert's hand covered hers, gentle, warm, steadying. "Please stay." That was when the storm arrived in silver heels and righteous fury. Eleanor Whitfield descended upon the table like an avenging angel in designer silk, her silver heels clicking sharp and fast against the marble floor. Her husband Harold trailed behind her, face flushed with embarrassment and too much scotch. "Natalie." Her voice could have frozen champagne. "What do you think you're doing?" Every conversation within 30 feet stopped. Even the jazz quartet seemed to soften, sensing the storm. Natalie's instinct was to shrink, to fold into herself the way she'd been trained to. "Mrs. Whitfield, Mrs. Whitfield, I presume," Robert interrupted, standing slowly, placing himself slightly between Eleanor and Natalie. "I'm Robert Sinclair. I invited Natalie to join our table. Is there a problem?" Eleanor's face twitched, the closest she could get to outrage without disturbing her Botox. "This is a family matter, Mr. Sinclair. You don't understand the situation." "Then enlighten me," Robert said evenly. "We took this girl in out of the goodness of our hearts," Harold slurred, stepping forward, "when she had nowhere else to go. We fed her, clothed her, sent her to school. While Veronica went to Yale." Natalie finished quietly, her voice cutting clean through the noise. The silence that followed was a blade. Eleanor's composure cracked. "How dare you?" "How dare she what?" Robert's voice cut through like steel wrapped in velvet. "Tell the truth? That you took in a traumatized 12-year-old not out of love, but for a photo op after Harold's company laid off 300 people." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The jazz stopped entirely. Heads turned. "That's a lie." Harold sputtered, color draining from his face. "Is it?" A new voice, frail but firm, sliced through the tension. Matthew's grandmother, Agnes, was slowly approaching, her walker clicking rhythmically across the floor. Her sharp eyes locked on Harold. "I remember the headlines," she said, right next to the stories about families losing their homes. CEO Harold Whitfield opens heart and home to orphan girl. "Don't you remember that, Harold?" Eleanor went pale. Natalie found her voice then, soft at first, but growing with each word. 10 years of silence finally cracking open. "I wasn't allowed to eat dinner with the family. I had an 8 p.m. curfew while Veronica stayed out all night. You introduced me as a charity case at the country club. You told your friends taking me in was the best business decision you ever made. You ungrateful little..." Eleanor began, stepping forward. "Finish that sentence," Robert said quietly, his posture shifting just enough to shield Natalie completely. "Please, give me a reason." A murmur spread. The bride herself approached now, Veronica's face stiff and pale under too much makeup. Her train trailed behind her like a ghost. "Mother, please. People are watching." "Let them watch," Robert said. "Let them see how you treat family." Veronica turned to Natalie, her eyes like shards of ice. "You're ruining my wedding." "No," came Agnes's voice again, strong and sure. She thumped her walker once for emphasis. "Your family's cruelty is ruining your wedding. This young woman deserved love, not a 10-year business arrangement." Natalie stood, trembling. "I need some air." "I'll come with you," Robert said immediately. They walked out together into the cool night air, the sound of whispers and breaking glass fading behind them. The garden terrace smelled of rain and roses. Natalie leaned against the stone railing, shaking. 10 years, she said, voice breaking. 10 years of trying to be quiet, helpful, invisible enough for them to love me. Robert didn't speak. He just stood beside her, not touching, simply present. "Tell me about the accident," he said softly. Her gaze drifted to the horizon. "Power line came down in a storm. Hit our car. My parents died instantly. I was trapped for hours. My arm was crushed. They had to take it." She looked down. "I was 12. The Whitfields showed up with photographers. Eleanor held my hand for the pictures, then didn't touch me again for 6 months." Robert's throat tightened. "My wife died 3 years ago. Brain aneurysm. 1 minute she was laughing at breakfast. The next she was gone. I know it's not the same, but I understand loss. And what it's like to exist in rooms where you don't quite belong." Natalie turned, really looking at him. "Why did you come to my table?" He met her eyes. "Because I saw someone who needed to know they weren't alone. And because—" he hesitated. "Because staying silent in the face of cruelty makes you." Her eyes glistened. "Your wife would have been proud of you." "I hope so," he whispered. She had this way of seeing people who tried to disappear and reminding them they mattered. They returned to chaos. Half the guests had left in outrage, the rest whispering corners. The Whitfields sat frozen at their table, their perfect image cracked beyond repair. And at the microphone, Agnes was giving a speech that would become legend. "Family isn't about blood," she said. "It's about choosing to love someone every single day, even when it's hard." Natalie moved out the next morning. When Eleanor called to give her 30 days to leave, Natalie didn't cry. She'd run out of tears years ago. But when her phone rang again, it was Robert. "Come stay with us," he said simply. "Abigail would love the company. And so would I. You barely know me." "I know enough," he replied. "I know you deserve better than them." 2 weeks later, his car pulled up to the Whitfield mansion. Natalie stood on the steps with 2 suitcases and a backpack, her life packed into 3 bags. Eleanor watched from the window. Veronica stood in the doorway, eyes cold. "You've ruined everything," Veronica said. "People are calling us monsters." "No," Robert said, lifting Natalie's bags into his trunk. "You made yourselves monsters. She just stopped letting you hide it. Why were you so mean to Miss Natalie?" Abigail piped up from the back seat, serious and small. Veronica blinked. "You wouldn't understand." "I'm 7, not dumb," Abigail said. "Daddy says family means choosing to love someone every day, even when it's hard. You just chose to be mean instead." The drive to the Sinclair home was quiet. Finally, Abigail asked softly, "Miss Natalie, why don't you have a mom and dad?" "They died when I was 12, Natalie said. "My mommy died when I was 4, Abigail said. "But Daddy says people who love us never really leave. They just love us from farther away." Natalie turned to look at Robert, and the tears she thought were gone returned. But for the first time, they were warm. Robert's house wasn't grand, but it was home. Children's drawings on the fridge, photos on the mantel, laughter echoing down narrow hallways. The kind of warmth marble could never hold. Over months, something fragile and beautiful bloomed. Natalie helped Abigail with homework, cooked dinners, told bedtime stories. She learned to smile again, not carefully, not quietly, but freely. And at night, after Abigail slept, she and Robert would talk for hours on the porch about loss, healing, and second chances. One evening, Natalie said, I applied to university. I want to study social work. Help kids like me. You'll be amazing, Robert said. The Whitfields were wrong about everything that mattered. She got the scholarship. Abigail hung a glitter banner across the living room. Congratulations, Aunt Natalie. Months later, Robert found her on the porch, the acceptance letter in her hand. I never thanked you properly, she said, for showing me what family feels like. You don't need to, he said. You've given us just as much. Abigail adores you. And I. He stopped, realizing the truth. I hadn't realized how lonely I was until you. Their eyes met. She reached for his hand, the only one she had, and it was enough. Patricia would have wanted this, Robert said softly. Are you happy? Happier than I've been in years. I love you, she whispered. I love you, too. They were married 1 year later in the backyard, daisies in her hair, Abigail throwing rose petals with both hands. Margaret from accounting officiated, crying through the vows. Agnes sat front row, proud and radiant. The Whitfields weren't invited. Their empire had crumbled under the weight of their own cruelty. But Robert didn't think of them. He thought of Patricia, of Abigail, of the woman beside him who'd turned silence into strength. 10 years later, at Abigail's graduation, she stood at the podium and said, When I was 7, my dad went to a wedding and came home with a woman who became my mom. He taught me that love isn't about blood. It's about saying, act like you're with me, and meaning it. My mom lost her arm, but never her kindness. She showed me that families aren't built from obligation. They're built from choice. In the crowd, Robert held Natalie's hand, the only one she had, but the only one she'd ever needed, because one man stood up from his assigned seat and spoke 6 words that changed everything. Act like you're with me, please. And he meant it forever.